Clarity by Dragonson, Chapter 6 Pattern, Part 2. Perhaps that the rector is not the best person for us to bring this idea to. With a hand scratching the chin of his unmasked face, Asai stared straight ahead at the back of his captain, who was marching mechanically down the hallway. I don't care if nobody believes us, Sasuke grumbled, arms folded over the multitude of scratches littering his arms. That cat is a new breed of infiltrator class, Grim. I'm sure of it. I thought it was adorable. Exercising her sudden penchant for puns, Sakura injured and groaned opposition of her teammates. You're just upset that it liked me better than you. You see, it's insidious. Sai nodded in all serious along with his teammates' assessment, which might or might not have been a joke. Really, are you still blaming that cat cute little thing for the whole traffic mess? No, just for tripping me on purpose and making me miss. If you couldn't see a bright orange tabby cat, then clearly you shouldn't be blaming the poor thing for your own failings. I'm telling you, it moved in ways faster than any ordinary house cat. It was almost as fast as. Stopping short before he mentioned the prior incident. Eventually, all three subordinates had their eyes trained on their stoic leader. I'm calling bull. Naruto, you were on lookout. What do you think? Stopping suddenly, all three behind him tripped and failed in their efforts not to run into their captain, as if invisible cats were scrambling under their feet, watching him intently as he turned, only enough for them to see a single eye slit of the mask he hadn't yet removed. They heard his voice as devoid of opinion as ever. I think that if it gets in your way again, you should kill it. Although to say this emotionless was a lie, there was a distinct animosity and even cruelty hidden well beneath the surface of this callous statement. They doubted their leader was even aware of it. They doubted their friend was aware of the way he let the duty of Kitsune overtake his usual mild mannerisms. Over the past weeks, they had managed to redeem themselves, both in their own eyes and more importantly in the eyes of the council. Only two people wouldn't seem to be satisfied no matter what: the director of operations Jin and Naruto himself. While normally reserved, now the boy had sacrificed his usual curiosity and leniency for the sake of the missions, of which they completed over a dozen successfully. If you'll excuse me, voice softening almost imperfectly, he was almost aware of this change overcoming him. More likely, he was aware of his negative impact on his team. They always came first. I need to stop in the room and I'll fill out some question forms. Can that wait until after dinner? Adopting her most professional tone, Sakura hoped she wouldn't have to argue with her leader about proper nutrition in his current state. These need to be in as soon as possible if we are to get new uniforms ordered in time. Chagrined, the two of the four looked down and what remained of their stealth suits, the covers of their armors which looked like a scratching post. Sakura was still fixated on their leader until he gave a satisfying answer. I will eat later. Do not worry. But she was worried. They all were. None more so, perhaps, than the one lurking around the corner. Although he was the best at concealing both his presence as well as his emotions, the only three lingered a moment longer outside with concerned comprehension aimed at the door. Come on, Sasuke sighed. We'll get takeout and bring it back to the room. We'll make that idiot eat. Not waiting for acceptance to his plan, Sasuke trotted off tiredly with Sai following, but Sakura stayed, and that was the only thing keeping Itachi from intervening. When she entered the door, he disappeared to give his report. Naruto, peeking her head in first, with the lack of immediate verbal denial, Sakura tread into their team's shared billets. Can I talk to you about something? I've taken down all your statements about the possible Torah class, Graham. Naruto sighed wearily, mask finally off and laying on the stack of papers. The assassins like to do things old school. Some called it being behind on technology. The Atlas branch in particular, they like to think of it as an unhackable. including my own. I've already submitted copies to both intelligence and the R&D, though not sure what good it will do. Blinking at his pessimistic expression, it was more emotion Naruto had admitted to in a long time, but did not satisfy his pink-haired teammate. Neither did the pale face and sunken eyes which lay behind the fox's mask, reassuring her of her captain's mental state. She considered what she was about to propose, wondering if now was the right time to bring up such frivolous concerns. The professional medic said no. The unflinching assassin said yes. The conflicted friend. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about our recent missions. She chided herself as her clearly exhausted leader mustered himself for this excuse, but set down his pen and gave her his undivided attention. Go ahead, Namekuji. Actually, sir, I prefer to keep this off the record given our questionable position. I'd rather not forward this idea without hard evidence. Something for their team's interest only, Naruto understood and conveyed with a blinding nod. Don't you find them strange? 6 standard seeking and destroying, 3 border patrols, and 3 information gatherings, Naruto recited clearly. No, I do not see anything unusual about them, although if you are talking about Director Jin's deliberate sabotage, wide-eyed, this revelation temporarily superseded importance in Sakura's mind. You knew? Of course I did. Back to his usual expressionless delivery. I need to be aware of it in order to ensure mission success. I have been relying on Weasel Senpai to recover the information redacted by the director and as a field agent when necessary. Gazing at his hands, which had started to tremble from fried nerves, he forced them to still through sheer will alone. I wish that I did not have to rely on him. The Director Jim was correct on one thing. I need to improve. With this thought preoccupying him, Naruto was unprepared as his teammate gently cupped his ragged hands with her own. Naruto, you don't have to take on all this responsibility by yourself. That's the purpose of having a team, so we can share the burden. This action and words induced the physical reactions in Naruto that he was unable to explain. He tried to blame the widening eyes and elevated heart rate on his fatigue and susceptibility to the caffeinated pills he had taken, but no rational explanation existed for why he could not meet his teammates' eyes, except that they reminded him of another pair of eyes filled with emotions he didn't know how to deal with either. Between her and Jin-sama, maybe silver just wasn't his color. I'll keep that in mind. Sakura accepted this with a gentle squeeze and allowed Naruto to retreat from the touch. Now, if that is all, actually it isn't. Guiltily, after already pushing him so far, Sakura knew this was something that Naruto would want her to say. It was something she wouldn't forgive herself for looking. 5 of the 6 of assassinations we contracted were for High Junior Shaolong. I taken care of former employees. Sakura frowned as she stood up straight and started pacing the small space their team had allotted. As an information broker, it strikes me as foolish for someone like Junior to be so careless with associates. It seems to be more than just spring cleaning, more like he's cutting ties with specific people. And this comes at the same time we're sent to keep tabs on Roman Torchwick, whom was foiled in a recent dust robbery while using Junior's goons. This first failure also marks the first time he escalated the scope of his robberies, going from petty crime to organized raid. Yet no more aid is coming from Junior, and the dust robberies are now becoming endemic. Not having to force himself to stay awake any longer, now Naruto was practically at the edge of his seat. You think he's getting aid from another source? More for confirmation than an actual question, Naruto allowed himself to frown as he mulled over the possibilities. Or is it someone else acting independently? No too big of a coincidence. Either he's hiring outside help or he's just the agent of a larger conspiracy. What did we find on those border patrols? Sakura asked, leading Naruto's train of thought in the direction she had been wandering down for the past few days. The White Fang. Recalling not just the border patrols, but the botched missions before that, Naruto's eyes narrowed as he began connecting certain dots that seemed to fit, but were too sporadic to call conclusive. They've been getting bolder lately. Recent upheaval, new leadership, though is it because of that, or because they have also found allies? They stared at one another for a time in which the only thing that could be heard was the ticking of the odd-fashioned pendulum clock in the corner. Looking into those cold, calculating blue eyes, Sakura was suddenly almost as afraid of them as she was the possibility she put forth. I shall speak to Kakashi about this. To her relief, he turned back to the stack of papers on his desk and directed his emptiness there. And Weasel, no need to worry the hierarchy just yet, but it wouldn't hurt to have others aware of what to look for. And Shiva? The pen once again paused in Naruto's hand as he found himself actually considering the possibility instead of outright dismissal. The fewer people we alert, the better if this turns out to be a waste of time. But Kuma's attention to detail would come in handy, and as difficult as Shiva herself is to work with, sometimes her penchant for gossip might actually be a benefit sometimes. The reliance on others stirred something in him that he couldn't identify, but he moved past it in light, focusing on current matters. I'll consider it. It was all she could ask for him to allow the chance that he'd never been given. Now, I really do need to finish these order forms. Oi, clear me a space so I can set this shit down. Bursting through the door and usurping the solemn air was Sasuke and Sai, both with arms fully laden with plastic containers and armpits stuffed with glass bottles. Sitting at the Spartan room's only table, Naruto narrowed his eyes and tried to find words of objection, but before any excuse could come, he found that his female teammate had already whisked away the reams of papers and tossed them on one of the identical bunk beds. Another blink found a disposable bowl plunked in front of him, condensation clinging to the translucent lid like he found the saliva clinging to the roof of his mouth. What's this? Food! Sasuke grunted, obviously not caring if it earned the blonde's ire. The kitchen's closed for repairs, so they only had cup of noodles. And lukewarm drinks, it seems. Taking one of the bottles from her teammate, Sakura scowled lightly at it and the rest of the meager offerings. I believe we have some Titan fish around here somewhere. Side offered, distributing his own load and ringing around the tight space to look for the emergency rations. At least that'll give us some protein. Sakura sighed, jabbing the awkwardly broken chopsticks into one of her two cups. Hardly the best nutrient backed. It was important. It was important, she realized, looking amongst their humble living space and the four bodies that occupied it. Like a Renaissance painting, the entirety of their lives fit into that tiny frame. Sarker wished she could take a picture of it, but doing so would also break the moment, so she settled for memorizing all the trivial details. Sighed, digging through the crates of provisions, maneuvering the empty ones around, at the postage stamp table for use as seats. Sasuke struggling with opening a bottle, not realizing it wasn't a twist off, but too proud to ask for help. Naruto himself, a piece of that original boy who played with the soppy noodles as if they were a mystery to be solved. Smiling, she hoped that this was just the beginning and not just a memory they would look back at it nostalgically. Clarity. Night fell upon Beacon as all student resident within their rooms, most of them having drifted off into dreamland while a few remained awake. Ruby was one of those few, but unlike the others who couldn't sleep because of upcoming tests or leadership duties, sleep escaped the young girl for an entirely different reason. Him. Looking back on everything that happened that day and trying to make sense of it left Ruby confused and sleepless. Not to mention just the teensiest bit scared of closing her eyes. Why though? Why should she fear a mortal in a mask? Like a hard math problem, she had a determination to work out the answer even if it cost her a full 8 hours rest. She would not be afraid of what she did not understand. There were plenty of things to be scared of. Every day she put her life on the line in this career she'd gotten. She faced down monsters that were the epitome of evil, soulless beasts that wanted nothing more than to feast upon her flesh. Compared to that, what was one man with a sword? John was a man with a sword. Maybe it was because he was just a man, a boy with little older than herself. If she guessed right, not simply a specter that haunted her dreams, he was a person, one whom others rallied behind as she had seen the way his allies marshaled to his side, and could not help comparing them with her own team. Nick clearly trusted him more than her own comrades did. If she were honest, he wasn't like Grim or John, or even her salty old uncle, who had a dim view on humanity as anyone she knew. He was like her. That was what scared her, the knowledge that in each of them was this demon lurking. And yet the fact that the most people acted like they didn't, or worse, simply didn't care, wasn't unfathomable as it was inexcusable. Oh sure, Ruby knew that she had her own darkness buried deep down somewhere under lock and key, but to give in to it was something else. She didn't consider herself strong for resisting its corrupt truths. That was just something each of them should be expected to do. In fact, it had come so naturally for so long that she never considered what it might be like to lose to that darkness, to be the one locked away behind those bars. She didn't know what it was like to be the one behind those blue eyes. End of chapter 6.